Welcome back to the Patriot Party, where truth, transparency, and constitutional principles come before politics. The Patriot Party movement is focused on re-empowering we the people, restoring accountability and putting America first through honest conversations and real solutions. America first, not America only, because we lead by example. Today's guest represents something powerful, not just conversation but action. Luke Mickelson is the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, a nonprofit that has delivered beds to over 350,000 children across 47 states and beyond, ensuring that no child has to sleep on the floor. What started as a garage project has grown into a nationwide movement driven by volunteers, communities, and a simple idea. When people step up locally, real change happens. Luke, welcome to the Patriot Party.
Hey, Matt. Hey, we're going to get this, right, brother?
Man, I think we're going to get it. This daggum app and technical difficulties, I believe we're going to get it. You know, we're kind of bootlegging it right now. Hopefully the audience, will hang with us. So if you're ready, we're going to jump right in again, and hopefully this one will take.
You betcha.
So take us back to the beginning. What was the moment where you realized this is something I have?
Yeah, there's a number of those, but maybe to better understand that the one moment that really I was introduced to this problem, happened in 2012. But I think it's important to understand a little bit about where I came from, and I'm from a small town, and I think you are too, right? We talked about this, and small town living's great. You know everybody, and they know you, which is the pros and cons of it. But I think early on, and you don't appreciate this when you're younger, but when you're older, you can look back and realize, hey, you know what? This part of my life, this growing up in a small town, really shaped who I've been. And I think one major thing that it helped is, when you're from a small town, you support everybody. You just have this obligation almost. When someone's pulled off on the side of the road, you just pull over to see who it is, if they need any help and stuff like that. I'm a farm kid from Idaho. When you're out in the farm ground, if something goes wrong, you got people you can call, or you got to fix it yourself. But this small town living, I loved it because it connected everybody, right? And I love that connection. And when you're from a small town and you're gonna be playing sports if you have any sort of athletic ability, and that was me. There was only 2 weeks of the entire year, pretty much from like 8th grade to when I graduated, that I didn't have a game or practice, right? You just played them all, and probably kept me out of trouble, to be honest with you. But that too also developed this team sport concept, and I loved competition, but I loved being with my friends and competing together, right? And you don't realize it till later on. That's who I am. I'm the guy that when you go to a party or you go to an event and there's a lot of people, man, that charges my batteries, right? That's what I need. Whereas a lot of people think that's exhausting, and so I just loved being around people. I loved communicating. I took a job in outside sales, if that doesn't shock everybody. I just loved being the person that people could look to, and we can solve problems together. It was it's just awesome. And in this situation, I should say in this avenue that I kind of put myself into, both professionally and my character coming up, I think it just placed me in the right time and moment for when my tiny moment and my passion and purpose presented itself, right? So that fast forward to 2012, I was about 35 years old. I had a great job. I was making good money, a family, I had 3 kids. I was coaching football and doing all that stuff. In my church, I served in a position called a young men's president, which was basically kind of the responsible for the boys over ages 12 to 18, the spiritual growth, as well as the activity during the week. That's hard to do nowadays, trying to find an activity for these boys that doesn't involve an Xbox or a controller or.
I'll tell you what we do for my daughter, and she's been doing it for 4 years now and loves it. Combat sports. She started with jiu-jitsu, and then she decided she wanted to be an MMA fighter, so she trains 5 days a week. She's 11, and she does jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and boxing, and getting ready to do Muay Thai too. But she's the girliest girl. I mean, people think she cheers, and she's like, nah, I fight. It's funny.
That's awesome. Well,
went from C's. I mean, it was but with her, the transition was just.
Oh, wow. And that's a dad win, right? You look back and that's
Yeah, because I know I can just see the football, the because she does wrestling, and the athletes. I can just see them at a high school event, and the football, daggum captains had a little too much drink, and she says, "Hey, keep your hands to yourself," and then he ends up with a broken arm or a black eye.
Amen, brother. Well, that's great. I mean, and again, that's probably some of the small town living mentality comes in. You take care of yourself, then you take care of the people around you. And that's probably one of the reasons why I love this young men's president position, because I got to work with the youth, right, which I love doing. I was a coach and always been a coach. I was fairly religious. I think I was pretty religious. I wanted them to grow up to be men, good men. Well, in this position, every other week I would meet with the other leaders of the church, and we'd talk about what's going on in the community, and we'd talk about people that the church was helping and whatnot. Well, one family came up that a leader was talking about that kind of caught my ear, because they lived in a part of the town I didn't know even existed, and I'd been riding my bike around this 4,000 populated town since I was 5, And so I was like, wait a minute, where is this place? And then she started talking about the things that the family need. She paid a visit and kind of assessed the situation. Well, the mom was a local school bus driver, and the dad kind of suffered from mental health, couldn't hold a job, so financially they struggled. And she said, so they need rides to work, they needed help with rent, the kids didn't have any beds, and they needed food, every other week, and blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Did you say the kids didn't have any beds, like, to sleep in? She says, that's right. And I'm like, well, they've got mattresses, right? She says, no, they're just sleeping on the floor. And dude, Matt, that hit me so hard and weird. It just, and I think it hit everybody in the room too, but for me, it sunk deep. And I remember, I thought about my own kids, sleeping on the floor and what that would be like. I remember the one day I slept on the floor when I didn't want to. It was hell, And then I thought, another thing came to mind was my Boy Scouts, right? Because that was the activity arm we used, was the Boy Scouts. Right? Yeah. And so I said, here's a great opportunity to get an Xbox controller out of these boys' hands and put a drill in it and a sander and teach them something, right?
Yeah.
And I'd never built furniture before in my life, but I wasn't a stranger to tools. I mean, I knew how to use some tools. And so that night I went home, grabbed my tape measure, grabbed my pen and paper, and started measuring my daughter's bunk bed. She had a bunk bed that we bought a long time ago, and came up with kind of a design that would be easy, because these are teenage kids, right? I wanted it to be easy for them. But it's sturdy bed, right? I didn't want it to be something that's going to fall apart. And trust me, since I've never built one, I was a little worried about that. But
so just so we have some clarity here, all right, so at this point you're just building a bed, but where is that bed going?
So this family had a couple of kids that were sleeping on the floor.
Okay, so the bed's going to just a single family. Okay.
Correct, yeah. Because you understand, I had no idea that child bedlessness was a real thing. No one did. This is the only.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, well, trust me, I get you. And this is the only situation I ever knew, and so I wanted to solve it, and I wanted my kids, my Boy Scouts, right, to be a part of that. So they came over to my garage, and our activity was Wednesday night, but they stayed Thursday and Friday, right, because they wanted to get this project done, and we had a great time. I mean, to watch these boys work on the wood and put this bed together, and we talked about what it was for, and helping the community. Just my coach came out. But I really wanted these boys to, a couple of things. I wanted them to feel the joy of service. Stop thinking about yourself. See how you can help someone else. That's where true joy comes from. And I tell people, look, your problems aren't going to go away just because you magically served someone. But what does happen, it puts you in a perspective or a mindset, so you have a different perspective on how to challenge and work those problems. I told them it's kind of like having a monster in your closet. If you never open the door and look at it and face it, that monster is just going to be bigger and bigger and uglier. That's what it's going to create in your mind. But when you can open the door and take a look at it,
Grab the bull by the horns.
yeah, baby, you can start shrinking that monster. And I think that's what service does for people. It gives you the ability to, calm yourself and be able to handle these situations or these difficulties that you might be in. And I wanted my Boy Scouts to learn that, as well as the
especially when the service, especially when the silver lining of the service is the betterment of mankind. It's not just service to something. It is service to a greater, power beyond yourself. Other than, I guess it is service to God and service to the greater good of man. It's service to both.
Well, and even further down that road, it's a service to a kid, to a child, right? And
Yeah.
these kids weren't far off age. They were 6, 7, and these boys were 12, 13 years old. So we built a bed, right? Well, it kind of got out in the congregation as well as a community of what we were doing. We were building a bed for a kid. People wanted to know about it. People wanted to see it. So Saturday came around to deliver this bed. Dude, I had like 20, 30 people show up at my house. And I'm like,
Really?
oh, dude. Well, they told their friends. They told their parents, the other leaders in the church, some people that knew the family. They all
For
wanted
sure,
to
grassroots. That's grassroots at its purest.
Well, hold your horses. It's coming. More's coming. So I said, look, we can't send an army over there to this 2-bedroom apartment. So me and a bunch of people stayed back. I had to clean my garage anyways because it was a freaking mess, But the next day at church, the kids just told me how awesome it was. How appreciative the parents were, how excited the kids were to get their bed, to get a bed, to get off the floor, And we provided everything: pillow, mattress, new sheets, a whole 9 yards. Well, I was excited. I was happy for the boys. They got to have that. Mission accomplished, right? A lot of missions, right? We solved the problem. We taught the boys something. They feel the joy of service, all these things. Well, the funny thing, Matt, what was going on with me personally in that time of my life, and it had been for a couple of years, was I was going through, I don't know, some people call it a midlife crisis. I don't know what you want to call it. I had a great life. On paper, I think most people would have killed to have it, But I just did not feel fulfilled. I think you get to a point in your life where you start questioning, what is it that's important to you? What measure of success am I going to use when I look back at my life?
And this just run. I have a question. At what age was this? How old were you?
About 34, 35.
Okay, so that was about 13 years ago.
Yeah, well, it was about 16 years ago, because I was going through it, man.
Because it happened for me at about 43.
Interesting.
2 years ago. The higher purpose for me. Yeah. And that's when this movement started, and it's just continued to go. So it happened for me kind of the same way. I was just about a decade behind you.
Yeah. Well, you sit down and you're like...
You said midlife, man. 35, 34, you're a young man. God dang. Now you're making me feel old.
Oh, man. Well, I'm older than you, brother, so don't say that.
I know, but midlife is not your midlife. Midlife, don't give us 34 as midlife.
Well, I think for me, it was just... And I've talked to a lot of people that have expressed very similar things. I think everybody hits a point in their life where you're like, okay, I'm out of the house, quote, I'm off, I'm not holding on to my parents' apron strings, whatever it's called. I've got my own family now. I've got my own responsibilities. I've got my kids. Everything's set. I've got retirement planned. I've got a job. What is this about then, right? And so
what else is there? There's got to be more, but it's not all about money. Money cannot be. Money is a means to an end. Money is not the end.
Well, and see, I grew up in a single parent home.
Okay.
My mom, 5 kids. And so she preached, right? She preached, get an education, get a good job, so you don't starve and you don't suffer. She just wanted the best for us.
No, and I understand from that perspective, absolutely, that's what you would preach to your children. Absolutely.
I get it. And I appreciate it because it gave me some drive to continue on with education and push myself in my sales position and all this. And so I did measure my success based on my paycheck. But when I hit this moment, some clarity came in. And I kept thinking, I don't really give 2 hoots how much money I make, right? That's not, in the grand scheme of things, that's not success to me. right? And especially when you look at, there's billionaires, there's, really very rich people that end up committing suicide because
Yes.
they're not happy, right? And I
Yes.
didn't want, not that I'm a millionaire, but, I knew, I was smart enough to realize, okay, money doesn't solve those problems, right? It solves some problems, but really what matters, and those are the questions you ask yourself. And when you start asking those questions, and they're hard to get answers for. What is life? I was going through a faith crisis. What do I believe in? Right? I've been following a religion for 35 years. I didn't know if it was even true anymore. Right? And
I went on a I went on a I was at a point once in my life where I was transitioning out of businesses, and I was able to do what I considered a spiritual journey for about 18 months, where I could just read everything that I get my hands on about every different ancient religion, anything I could, and then form what I thought. I had always, grew up strict Catholic, altar boy,
Oh
catechism,
yeah.
all that stuff. So I wanted to pull in, and from my perspective, and I was lucky enough to have the time to do it.
Yeah, and I think same for me. I think when you finally realize I'm on my own 2 feet, right, and I need to solve some of these questions. I need to find out what it is that I want to measure success on. But where I was going with this is when you go in this path, when you go down this path, you start asking, and you don't get questions answered, right? It can feel very lost, right? It can feel very alone, almost depressed, right? And I'm not a depressed person, right? I'm pretty outgoing, pretty happy. But I was in the middle of this. No one knew about it. I was just internally struggling, trying to pull myself out of it, trying to find these answers. Well, it was in the middle of all of this when this bed situation happened, right? And so it filled my bucket, Matt. I got so much joy out of it. I got more than I'd ever felt in any of other services that we did. And we did a lot, with the Boy Scouts and throughout life. I'd always served. But this one really hit home for me for whatever reason. And so when we delivered the bed and I heard about it and all that, it was awesome. But the next week comes around, right? And it's funny how life just creeps itself back in, right? The next thing you know, you're sitting on the couch and you're mulling over what just happened. You're feeling this almost, lost or cloud come back over you. And I didn't want that to happen. I was struggling with it, right? And while I'm sitting on this couch, me and my kids were watching Big Bang Theory, it was our program back then. And some commercial comes on. And this was just after Thanksgiving, so Christmas was on all these everybody's mind. And if you got kids and it's Christmas time and they see something they want, what's going to happen, right? Every parent knows that the kid's going to beg for this toy, and of course they did, right? They turned around, Dad, can we get another Xbox? And it just hit me funny, right? Here I was in the depths of despair, trying to boost myself back up. And it was worse now because I just had got out of the hole and now I feel like I'm back in it. And, these boys had a great experience and now I'm down in the hole and my kids are complaining about the Xbox. They know I'm not going to buy them, and they've got beds and these kids don't have beds and they should, just this big storm was going in my mind. The next thing I knew, I stood up. I didn't say a word. I just stood up and I walked to the garage door. And my kids are like, Dad, where are you going? Right? And I turned around and I said, I have some leftover wood. I'm going to build another bunk bed and you're going to come and help me. I wanted my kids to have the same experience the Boy Scouts did. I wanted them to know the joy of service and giving back and to appreciate the things they had. Like, you got a bed, right? Some kids don't even have a bed. You're not going to get another Xbox, right?
Yeah.
And so we started building the second bunk bed. And it was awesome. Right? I knew how to do it a little bit better, obviously, because I just did one. But so I got to help my daughter while she, was in her pink tutu hammering away, and my son was in his Boise State jersey, drilling wood together. We had a great time. But the ironic and funny part about this was, I had no idea what to do with this bed. Right? I didn't know.
Well, that's why I asked in the beginning. I'm like, I guess it had missed me when you were talking about the church. I didn't connect the dots. I thought that's where the idea spun. I didn't realize that's where the bed was going. That's why I asked. I said, well, where is this bed going? Okay, all right. Now we get back to my question. All right, so where did this bed go?
Exactly. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this thing? And I think it's important to understand, and I want everybody listeners to understand, look, I'm just a farm kid from Idaho, right? And These
And you know, it's funny, but did you say that? And I'm gonna pull out for a second, and we're gonna go right back into what you're doing because this is a wonderful story. If you need to jot down a note so you know right where you're at, I need you right where you're at. But it's funny that you say that because literally, like I've been trying to reach out to our politicians for months, set up a date when I can come to DC, give them a hardbound curriculum for the pilot program that's currently being taught in their school system here in Louisiana before the first donation has even been given. To tell them what we're doing with municipalities to create less friction between their constituents and help with affordability and transparency with our software that we built, our AI assisted software. And so everybody's like, so anyway, I'm like, well, shoot. I mean, I'm just a small town guy, but I'm going to get on a plane. I'm going to D.C. and I'm going to find out where these offices are, and I'm going in there and I'm beating the door down. And I documented it, and I had 1 million people following on X of the whole trip as I went into legislators' offices.
That's awesome. Well, but you're right, Matt. Listen, you're just a farm kid too.
Yeah, I mean, I used to tip cows.
That's right.
Now I know people are going to say that's not crazy. We were kids. Come on, don't play the whole clip. We were kids.
Well, but the point here is, look, I'm a farm kid from Idaho, right? I'm nobody special, right? But anybody can do it. It just takes a tiny moment, and this is what I do my public speaking on. Tiny moments, right? Acting on tiny moments. That's where you find passion. And passion turns into purpose, right? I didn't build this second bunk bed, and this is important to understand. I didn't build that second bunk bed because I knew child bedlessness was a problem. But no one did. I built the second bunk bed because I wanted my kids to appreciate service and the feelings and the joys from that, and I wanted them to appreciate the things they had. So here I sit in my garage as this bunk bed, not knowing what to do.
Hold on one second. I always say I started this with civic passion and a microphone. You started it with passion and a garage. That's your two, or passion and a hammer, or whatever you want to do.
Takes all sorts of tools.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is great. Keep going. I'm sorry. I didn't want to try not to play the rope.
I like that. I actually had, when I was sitting with Mike Rowe, and we'll talk about that later on, he said, "Isn't it great? All good things seem to start in a garage." I thought that was a pretty funny story. So we're sitting.
Actually, this did too.
Yeah, exactly. Of course it did. Of course it did, brother.
Microsoft,
So, yeah, exactly. So, my wife at the time says, "Why don't you just throw it on Facebook buy sell trade?" Now, this is 14 years ago. I wasn't much of a Facebooker. I'd throw some pictures of the sturgeon I caught. That's about it. So I didn't know what that
sturgeon.
meant.
You caught a sturgeon?
Oh, yeah.
Are they I used to work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and every time we had a sighting, we'd have to call them and document it. Those are prehistoric fishes.
Oh, yeah, baby. You catch, here in Idaho, they're white sturgeons, so you can catch, 10, 12 footers. They're 200 years old. It's pretty amazing. Oh, yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. Go ahead.
Yeah. You can't take them out of the water, but
okay, you can't take. Okay. Because they're endangered, right?
They're not necessarily endangered. It's just you just can't. And I love that rule, right? They're good eating, and there's farms that do that, but dude, they're beautiful creatures, right? And they need to stay alive. They're fun to catch. They're fun to. They're prehistoric.
I don't think ours were white. They were on the East Coast. They have the rivers on the East Coast.
Yeah, they have green sturgeon over there, and there's probably other species as well. But
I know that. I'm pretty sure they were endangered though, because we had to do all these documentations and stuff every time there was a sighting.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway, go ahead back to the story. We get off on sturgeon.
Yeah, brother. So I was like, sure, I'll put it on this buy sell trade, whatever that means. Well, two things happened that really shocked me. The first thing is there was all sorts of people, because I didn't really know how this worked, but there was all sorts of people that commented, right? People I had no idea who they were, right? I didn't know that they even knew my Facebook. I didn't know how that worked. And I mean, even friends that I hadn't talked to for 20 years, right, were commenting on this post. And the second thing was what they were commenting about. All of them knew kids that were sleeping on the floor. All of them knew.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I was like,
that is a shame. And that's why I say charity starts at home. That's why we said in the beginning, America first, not America only because we lead by example, but we've got to lead by example, by God. We shouldn't have our kids sleeping on floors if we're going to lead the world, for example.
Well, it takes individuals that see a problem and decide to act on it. Right,
about solutions. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solutions. That's why we won't even have a guest on. If they want to come on and criticize something, they got to have the framework for a solution. Because we're tired of the endless criticism with no solution. That's part of the problem.
Well, in part of my tiny moment Tiny Moment Tour, when I speak to like colleges and high schools and stuff, I say, listen, we all want to change. We all want to see change happen. I mean, we spend a lot of time doing that, even personally. I mean, we read self-help books. We go to counseling. We talk to.
Let me ask you something, because your boots on the ground, and I've had some experiences, and I talk about this with some other people, but I think you would be a good person. So I had an experience a few months ago where the media is creating this polarization that's splitting everything. And I was interacting with, Louisiana's a red state. Well, I was interacting out in San Francisco with my daughter at art festivals. She lives out there. And I was interacting with what we do and all that stuff. And everybody was so cool about the constitutional curriculum. And they're like, hey, we're not that far apart. We're not like it says on the media. We just want to agree to disagree. And I'm like, really? Because that's what we're introducing in our curriculum with civil discourse again. That's what we say. And it's like it's really not like that. Is it the same with you? Have you seen that? It's not really that split. Not really quite.
No, 100%.
Yes.
You know what? There's a couple of things I realized when I saw that post. Not only did people come out of the woodwork to share with me kids that they found were in trouble, but they also wanted to help. And I found, Matt, that it wasn't what I saw on the media. It wasn't what I heard on the news. No, that people are angry and
that's why we put out, we put out a thing, and this goes right along with we put out a good graphic. It caught kind of viral. We've gotten 300,000-400,000 views on it, but it's got the graphics, and it says one people, one government, we the people. We got to stop with this polarization, and we got to move straight ahead, not left, not right, forward.
That's right, and I learned that there were millions of people. Well, at least in my little small town, there were thousands of people that want to help. They just don't know how.
Thousands? How many people live in your town?
Well, there's a combined area. It's called the Magic Valley. So there's several towns. It's about 80,000 people. It's not a...
Oh, God, you said small town. I grew up, my county seat was 3,000. The stoplight started blinking at 6 o'clock, and then the other towns were 800 people.
My town was 4,000, but we had some bigger towns around. But the point is like, this community, right? I didn't realize that there was that many people that wanted to help, and it was beautiful to see, right? I had strangers coming over to my house when we decided to build a bunch of beds. I had strangers coming to my house, never knew who they were. They just grabbed a drill. I taught them how to do it, and we started building beds together.
That is so cool.
Oh, it was so awesome.
Gosh, that's so cool.
But here in the middle of this, I wanted this bed that me and my kids built, right? I wanted it to go to a special, they're all special kids, but I wanted it to go to a need that was really just a big need. And, a friend of mine called me and said, hey, Luke, have you delivered that bed yet? I said, no, not yet. She says, let me tell you about Haley. I said, okay. Haley's a 6-year-old girl that has never slept on a bed. She's only slept in the backseat of her mom's car. They were homeless. And my friend worked for the services and social services and helped them get a house, right? So they finally had a house. And I just thought of little Haley sleeping in the backseat of her mom's car for her whole life, right? And I thought, this is what I'm looking for. This is the situation I want this bed to go to. So me and my buddy, we loaded this bed up and took off for Haley's house. Well, I'd helped with homelessness before. I'd, seen poverty and transitioning homelessness and foster care. I'd seen these situations before, but I never walked into them looking at it through the eyes of a 6-year-old, right? So when you walk in this house, there was nothing in the house. There was a hot plate that had a can of soup on, right? So you realize there's no couch or TV to watch cartoons. There's no table and chair to eat, Lucky Charms on in the morning. Right.
Have y'all joined forces with any nonprofits for hunger? So when you go into these places, you can also offer food and a bed.
I'll talk about that here in a minute, because that's important to a nonprofit existence. By the way, it's called Mission Creek, but I'll talk about that here in a minute.
We just launched our nonprofit at the end of last year, the American Institute for Civic Leadership, which is a 501c3. It's federally recognized, charitable, education.
Nice.
all that. And then later this year, we're launching Patriot Advocacy, which is going to be a 501c4, which will be constitutional activism. So, the Patriot Party is the media branch of the media and tech company. It's about conversation. Then the part that builds the solutions is Civic Truth Media Group, which is the parent company. And we build the AI-assisted civic tools to re-empower the people, where we have the federal policy producer, where you can put in and get real-time sponsor-ready legislation with an idea built on data points, not donors. And we're going to do sponsor a competition in middle and high school each year, where we'll have a middle and high school winner for the best legislation to solve some of our issues, and they'll win a scholarship, and their legislation can be taken up by their legislators or parts of it to Washington, D.C., so they can go in history as helping to fix the country. Wow. So we have civic instructors, we have parents, we have teachers, all getting together to try to win scholarships and fix our country, and we're giving them the technology to do it. Then we have the American Institute for Civic Leadership, which is the education. Then Patriot Advocacy, which will take and hopefully pull the stuff back on the rails that's gone off. So we're trying to do a nonviolent generational reset.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. And as a nonprofit, and I do some nonprofit consulting, I highly recommend you stay focused on your mission, right? Because it is super important, right? And so I knew that when I was delivering beds and started delivering more beds. Listen, like you see all sorts of needs, right? You walk in, and not only if the kid doesn't have a bed, there's a good chance they don't have a lot of things, and the whole family, right? And it's hard.
They don't have food. If they don't have somewhere to sleep, they probably don't have food. That's why I asked.
Well, I learned that, food, clothing, shelter, these are the three big, right?
I only asked this because we're putting together part of phase one. Well, phase one, the first part is scaling up the federal policy producer, our education tool. The next part is we already own all the software. We're launching a fast streaming news channel called Truth Matters News on Roku, Samsung, simulcast on social media. There's going to be fact-based news, no rumor mills, independently verified, no partisan takes, look through a constitutional lens. Everything's fact-based, and we're going to be putting on internationally sponsored combat events locally, where we will funnel for a few charities and our charity international charitable donations, where we have the exclusive rights to cover the combat events.
Cool. That's awesome.
That's why I only ask it was we try to create a coalition, any nonprofit or business with that America First mindset, not the MAGA like Republican, but America First. Just listen to the meaning, not linking it to a political party. Anybody with that, we're trying to help with a coalition so we can help the country, because we are stronger together, and it's going to take all of us, and we can do better.
My montage, my personal theme is we're just humans helping humans, right? Matt, when a lot of people continue to ask certainly back when this Christmas project turned into a charity, right? They asked, well, is this a faith-based charity? And I said, listen, it's faith-based in the fact that most people come to our charity because they have a calling from somewhere, right? But I didn't want it to be based on anything other than helping children. Because good.
Other than doing good. I mean, I just hate where we have to just categorize everything. Why can't we just say, well, let me ask you, is this good? Is this something you would feel good about helping? What does it matter where it came from?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. It's not about where you've been. It's where you're at, and you're trying to help children.
Again, this kind of goes back to when I was in the middle of this faith crisis, right? When you're doing that, you just don't know. Number one, you feel like, because you've been taught your whole life, oh, you're just being led by the devil. You're questioning God and stuff like that. So you're being led by the devil. And boy, I didn't feel like I was led by the devil. I felt like I was a good dude. Did I have questions that were unanswered? Sure. Did I not know? Did my little tiny feeble brain not connect the dots? Whatever it was, I just had some questions. And I remember thinking, Matt, back then, listen, I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what God you believe in, because you can't tell me, whatever God you believe in, you can't tell me that helping a child get a bed is the wrong thing to do. You can't tell me that. I know that for a fact.
And I think one of the most enlightened, and I don't normally get into the whole religious thing, because the relationship you have with your creator is your relationship, and it's subjective. I can't tell you about it, and you can't tell me about mine.
Right.
So I don't normally get into that. But one of the most enlightened comments I think I ever heard was from an old man. And he said, you know what? He said, God is like the sea, and religions are like rivers, and all rivers lead to the sea.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I can't argue with that.
Well, why? There's no.
Why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why? I just kept thinking. Listen, if you break us all down to the least common denominator, right? We're just human beings, right? And that's what connects us all. We're all different shapes and sizes and colors and cultures and whatever you want to call it. And that doesn't matter, especially, Matt, when you've got these little humans that can't help themselves. And they
didn't ask to be brought here. They're innocent.
Mm-hmm.
We need to take care of our children.
Well, and they're in this situation not because of anybody else's choice, or not because of their choices, because of someone else's choices,
yes.
right? And they can't help themselves. It's not like some other situations where people just have a hard time and could help themselves. They just don't know how because of whatever, and that's fine. But these kids literally cannot help themselves, so they have to have us. And little Haley, this was my moment, Matt, when I met Haley, who didn't have a bed. She didn't know why we were there. And, I leaned down, I looked down to her, and said, Haley, why don't you show me your bedroom? And so she walked us back in the bedroom. And you know what this looks like. There's holes in the carpet. There's tears in the wallpaper. There's no closet door, right? The lights, it's dim in there.
I try to tell my daughter all the time, I'm like, you don't understand how lucky you are.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there's a lot of people that go to your school that are hungry at night when they go to bed.
Right.
You don't understand it.
Well, but of all of those things, the most shocking image was when I looked in the corner of the room. There was a pile of clothes. It was a nest, and that's where Haley slept. She would come home from school, she puts her PJs on, sleep on her school clothes, and then the next day put them back on and go to school. Now, I don't know about you. I was not prepared for that. I'd never seen child bedlessness. I'd heard about it, obviously, from the previous situation, but I'd never seen it. And to see that, I mean, you want to talk about, I'm a farm kid, tough farm kid from Idaho, trying to keep it the frick together, right? I mean, trying to hold this thing together. And I just got really, well, first of all, I was really frustrated. Like, this is going on in my hometown. These kids are sleeping like this bull crap, right? Not my watch, right? And then I got excited because we brought Haley her first bed. She didn't know it. So we started bringing in these pieces of bed and put it together. And I watched Haley. I wanted to see what her reaction was like, right? And sure enough, the minute she realized...
I felt it was like a flower that gets sunlight and it just blossoms.
Well, it blew. It was like a bomb.
Yeah,
I mean, she just erupted. It was awesome. Like, she came over and hugged us, these two strange dudes in her room making all sorts of racket. And then she did something, Matt, that I will never forget. She went over and hugged and kissed the bed. I had never seen a child kiss a bed before. Something as simple and mundane as you and I think as a bed. That's what it meant to her. And if
you didn't, if before that, and I know you did, but if before that you could not comprehend the purity of your purpose, I guarantee you that put it in perspective.
Well, absolutely. Well, even more than I could imagine. And if that wasn't enough, if that wasn't enough to rip your heart out, right, and change me instantly, then I look up at Mom. And here's a single mom, and I was raised by a single mom, so I knew what every single one of those tears meant. I knew the frustration and the hurt and the guilt and the worry and the, for not being able to provide for her child like she wants to, right?
No.
I saw it. I knew it.
No, I know.
And right then, Matt, and you're right, it was a moment right then, I knew this was way more than just a bed. Mm-hmm. Way more than just a bed. And I tell all the listeners I talk to on podcasts, I said, listen, you listeners right now, just give me 60 seconds of your time. And I want you to think, what would it be like to be a 6-year-old, 6-year-old kid without a bed? When you wake up, you're sore, you didn't sleep well. They call it waking up on the wrong side of the bed for a reason. Well, these guys are waking up on the wrong side of whatever, right? And then they're expected to go to school. They're expected to be in a good attitude. They're expected to learn at the same rate as other kids that got a good night's sleep. And of course they don't, right? They get bad grades.
Well, and then you compound that with either not eating or eating something that's very low in nutrition
Oh,
because that's
100%.
inexpensive or whatever.
Yep.
You put that on top of it with the
Oh,
they have a
yeah.
sugar crash during the day. Either way, they are starting down here instead of on a level playing field.
100%. And that's just the physical side of things.
Yes,
Then you
yes.
talk about the mental side of things. These kids, they can't have sleepovers, right? They don't have friends come over to their house because
Well, I didn't
they're
even think about
embarrassed.
that.
Right. Well, and so what do? They go to their friend's house.
Yeah.
Well, then they walk into little Johnny's room, and not only does Johnny have a bed, he's got throw pillows. I mean, what kind of message does that maybe internally teach or tell these kids? And worse yet, Matt, when you and I have a bad day, boss was hard on us, we lost a client, whatever it is, or worse yet, we have the flu. Tell me, what is the one place on the planet that everybody just can't wait to crawl into in these situations? It's your bed.
Yeah.
And these kids don't have it. I speak all over the country, and stay in hotels, nice hotels, right? I haven't stayed in a bed yet that I would rather have stayed in than my own. And that's because it's not about comfort. It's about safety, sanctuary, security. That's what these kids don't have. That's when I say this is more than just a bed, right?
Yeah, and then you got to think that if when they go over to Johnny's house or whoever, and they see a throw pillow, or they see multiple beds in one person's room, or whatever they see, they start to think in their mind, because you know how kids get, and even adults get in their own head, and maybe I'm not worth what they're worth, or maybe I'm not as good as they're, and then they start to degrade themselves, and they end up with self-esteem issues and self-confidence issues. It's a whole load of stuff other than a bed. It's pretty much a childhood.
Let me give you a statistic. Now, this is not a national statistic. It's not even a statistic. It's just food for thought. Let me give this to you. So when we got done with Haley's house, right? Listen, I tell people I'm a farm kid from Idaho, love hunting, I love fishing, I love outdoor sports, I love college football on Saturdays. I loved all this stuff. And Matt, in a snap of a finger, that 35 years worth of love and stuff went away instantly because I thought about it. Only took me a couple of hours a night for a couple of days with my kids to build a bed and solve that problem. That's well worth my time, right? So we started building more beds. Well, as we built more beds, we learned about more kids that needed help. And when we and more people wanted to help. Well, here's my story. We had a chapter president. Actually, he wasn't a chapter president at the time. He was just a friend that lived just 3 or 4 hours away. He wanted to do it in his own hometown. So he started as a chapter. Well, what he did for a living was he worked in the juvenile detention center. He was a guard in there. And I don't know how it works other than once in a while they bring a group of kids, sit them in a circle, and they talk, right? It's just a connection type conversation. Well, he led some of these groups. When he became a chapter president, he told me, he says, Luke, I was just curious. So in the middle of these groups, he asked, and there was about 20 kids there, I think. He said, how many of you grew up without a bed? And you know what the percentage of that was?
1 in 10. Almost
80?
1 in 10. That would have been 90%.
Yeah, pretty damn close.
1.5 higher than what I thought. I was thinking that was high, giving it that.
85% of those kids grew up without a bed.
Oh.
It doesn't take rocket science to kind of put that together, right? How I'm not saying it just because they didn't have a bed they got there, but that's one part of the equation. When you don't get good grades, right? You get hounded, you get depressed, you're down on yourself, you don't have good friends because you're upset. All of these things contribute to not being on the right path, right? And so I knew that. I saw that, right? And as we built more beds, more kids were uncovered, if you will. Not just in my own hometown, in the entire country.
I would throw this out there as well, if you haven't thought about it already. The first thing that came to mind was food. Being able to walk in and offer a turnkey, hey, we're going to give you a bed, but we work with these other nonprofits that do this. Do y'all need any of these services? The first thing that came to mind was food, but there's a lot of other things that they need other than food. A lot of other things that they need.
Well, we wanted to focus on, number one, keep in mind, I had a full-time job, right? So I was doing this part-time, and when we decided to be a charity, and we did that because, or I did that because I knew that there was a lot of kids that we were getting told about that I knew some farm kid from Idaho is not going to solve this problem because it was too big, and it was in other states. This problem
Is there a centralized system, like some kind of census or something, to where you can locate these kids, or is this kind of like a pass the word, tell?
pretty the biggest problem, Matt, and this is why I'm so grateful to have me on, by the way, is
Absolutely.
I need to raise awareness. We as a human being, we need to raise awareness about this problem. Let me tell you how big it is. And I didn't know how big it was. I mean, I didn't know that this was an issue. The word bedlessness isn't even a real word. It doesn't know it doesn't exist. I mean, that's the funny thing. And so
Yeah.
let me tell you what. So when we started building more beds and wanted to become a charity, I thought, okay, I'm going to do what everybody else does.
Now,
I'm going
you
to
say
call.
when we started building beds, give us a perspective. Okay, so we go from one to another one. How does this compound? Do we go from 2 to 10 to 100? How does this compound?
So that first season, that first holiday season, right after Haley, we built 21 beds and delivered them
Okay.
all before Santa showed up. Well, the next year,
which is commendable in a garage, but very small considering what you've been able to.
well, it was huge considering we didn't know anybody, and now,
Well, yeah, I mean,
of course,
yeah,
now
in
we
a
know, right?
garage.
Well, and I'll give you some numbers here in a minute. Blow your socks off. So the next year, this was just a family Christmas project. Keep in mind, it wasn't a charity. It was just we're going to do this every
That
Christmas.
is so
right?
cool.
So the next year, we built 51 beds, and my buddy built some in Boise, right? So we had
Okay.
twin in Boise. Then the next year, we got more people that wanted to help, more people that wanted to give us money, but we weren't a charity. So I was like, okay, I guess I got to be a charity, right? So I looked to find another charity that provided beds for kids. In the entire country, I found one, just one, in North Carolina. And that was shocker number one. And then more people, or as we delivered more beds and shared what we did, I started getting calls from social service people, foster care, child protective services, CASA. And come to find out, I was like their favorite guy. And they'd call me all the time. And I found out is because one of them said, Luke, you don't understand. Getting a bed for a child in this situation, right? Getting a bed for a child is most of the time the single hardest thing for them to get.
And that should be one of the easiest
Right.
food, bed. It's like right there.
Well, and the reason why, and I mentioned the three big, like food, clothing, shelter, right? That's the
Yeah.
three big, right? And there's a lot of charities that do that, which is awesome. But when there's no charities that provide a bed for a child, these social workers, they're stuck. They got to go buy it, right? Or try to get some used POS donated. So that's when I realized this is a major problem that no one is doing anything about. And since then, let me fast forward to where we're at right now. So since then, we started putting on chapters. Well, now, 2026, right? We've put on and trained 440 plus chapters. We're in 4 countries. We cover almost every state. And this summer, we will have built our 400,000th bed.
Man, that is just incredible. Gosh dang it, that is incredible. Congratulations, man.
It's kind of sad too, right? That there's this problem.
Well, I mean, it is sad, but you don't want to look at it as sad. It's
Right.
I mean, you're fixing
doing-
something. It's
Well,
sad it happened, but what would be more sad is if you weren't there to fix it.
Well, and that yeah, of course, that's a really sad part.
Yeah.
But then the sad thing is too is child bedlessness represents greater than 3% of any population on average. So if you live in a town of 100,000 people, there are more than 3,000 kids sleeping on the floor. And let me put this in even better perspective for you. As you and I talk right now, there are 150,000 kids on our waiting list. 150,000
What?
kids. Yeah. And to top it off, we only cover 28% of the United States right now. So
Let me ask you this, because margins and all that stuff. With me being more of an analytical person, and I'm sure people that might want to help might have an interest. What does it cost y'all to build a bed?
great question. So long time ago, right? I knew I wasn't going to rely on grants, and didn't want to do that. I wanted my program to, I was an entrepreneur. I was a business leader, right? I wanted my program to sustain itself. So I came up with what's called Sponsor a Bed program. And that's, since then, this is how we fund and execute our mission. When we find an organization that wants to do like a team building exercise, right? They want to build beds. We require a donation that matches $300 for every bed that they want to build. Because we provide, the bed, the mattress, the sheets, pillows, and delivery of the bed, right? So if a company wants to build,
and that's a full bed.
That's a full delivered bed.
So an individual can come to your organization, and while we're talking about, where do you find your organization?
shpbeds.org.
They can come to your organization and they can say, "I want to donate a bed." And they can give $300.
Boom.
And they will personally be able to donate a bed to whoever.
That's right. And here's the cool thing, right? Look, and I know, Matt, you and I are a lot alike. I can already tell, right?
Yeah, we are. I can tell it.
Well, and listen, I had my opinions of charities back in the day, right? And we all, I don't know, I had this big question mark. Some people just have a question mark over it, especially when you start donating dollars. Well, I wanted to make sure that there was no question mark when you donate
transparency, full transparency, so there's nothing hidden opaquely in the dark.
Correct. So first of all, when you go to our website, shpbeds.org, you're not going to see some big national website. You used to, but we know where the problem is. The problem is in your community. It's in mine too, but I'm taking care of mine. I want you to see what's going on in your community. So when you bring up shpbeds.org,
that's smart. It's almost like it's almost like franchising a business. It's easier to grow out than try to do it all in one and scale nationally.
Again, I knew child bedlessness was not going to be solved by some farm kid from Idaho in our country. It was going to be solved by people like me, other, quote, farm kids.
And see, that's what we're building. See, we say that we don't have the solutions. We're just building the foundation for everyone to bring the solutions together so we can find out and then provide them to our lawmakers to figure out what is the best. True stuff built on data on what's best for the people that's not partisan.
Well, this is a community problem.
Everything going on is a community problem.
100%, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to provide a platform.
And that's wonderful. Gosh dang it, it's so admirable.
Well, I wanted to provide a platform that people could do, common Joes like me, that could do what I did in their own hometown, right? And as I mentioned, we're only covering 28% of the United States, right? So when you bring up our shpbeds.org, you're going to see the closest chapter to you. You're going to see how many kids are on their waiting list. You're going to see how many beds that chapter's built. You're going to see the activities that they're doing, so you can be a part of it. If you want to donate, right?
That's cool.
This is as transparent as I can be, Matt. When you donate, let's say $100, right? Goes to the chapter and stays in that chapter. It stays in that community. We take 10% because I got to turn on the lights and pay for insurance.
Yeah, that's very, very reasonable. It's very, very. That's definitely fair market value. Probably below it.
Right. So and that's important. I wanted people to know exactly where their money goes. And trust me, we run very, very lean. We're a $35 million organization, and we only have about 25 full-time employees. It's pretty small. But we want to make
efficient.
Sure
it's small and efficient.
Well,
that's what we need. All these inefficiencies of
You got to be that way. So now, because of that, right now, when people donate, their money stays there. The beds stay in that community. Now, we also have a tab, and to answer your earlier question, we have a tab on every one of these chapters' websites called "Apply for a Bed." So if you yourself has a child sleeping on the floor, let's say your neighbor does, or your friend or sister 5 states over, you can apply for a bed for that child based on the zip code. If a chapter president has accepted that zip code as a deliverable area, they will get that application, right?
Do you have a because I just got an idea that kind of coincides with where I've been going at with some of my questions. Do you have a partner page on your website that lists all the other nonprofits that provide services where you can refer them to your nonprofit partners. And if you do that, and you can actually get the nonprofits to do a backlink where they backlink with yours, that really helps with your SEO. So Google then views you and puts you way higher in the search.
We're because we run so lean and so thin, right? Our bandwidth is pretty tight. We spend a lot of time just not just raising awareness, but making our chapter presidents as efficient as possible. And the reason why that's important is because.
And I only say this because word of mouth is the best advertisement. If somebody tells you something from their perspective, you're going to give it a lot more credence than if you go by a billboard or you see something on social media. So I only say this because if you partner with other nonprofits, they're going to be pushing the word out for you too. And then all of you combine your social media and help one another. It's kind of like when I went to see Representative Troy Carter, his office. They want me to work with their digital content person so they can start putting out what we're doing in Louisiana on their government site and funneling it. Yeah. And you could do that as well and funnel it, and it would raise your awareness. And if you're higher on the search engine in Google, you're going to get hundreds of thousands of more views just by being, a page or two up.
100%. 100%. We spend a lot of time in marketing. We got some good marketing people that work on our SEO and work on that kind of stuff because it is important. And we go into these situations and we partner.
You always want to do your ROI, your return on investment. Yep. What's the least I can put in to get the most back from it? And that's why I'm saying you don't have to invest anything. You can provide another service to the people that you're already providing a service to, and the people will push out your stuff, and it'll help your search engine optimization.
We do. We taught our chapter presidents a long time ago. Listen, mission creep is difficult, and it's actually the fastest way to ruin your charity if you deviate from your mission. And the beauty about it is there's a lot of.
Do you not have it in bylaws? Like, has it not been written in the formation bylaws that they cannot deviate from the mission?
You bet, absolutely. Okay. I shouldn't say most, but a lot of nonprofits I counsel and work with do not. They don't understand. And listen, here's the problem.
With ours too, so it all stays mission aligned.
Mission aligned, that's right. And what happens is, especially any nonprofit out there that wants to grow, right? I learned this. When you want to grow, you're going to bring people into your organization, which is awesome, right? But you got to remember, these are big-hearted people like yourself. They're going to walk into a Haley situation, and they're going to see things that they want to help out with because they're big-hearted people, right? And it's hard to tell chapter presidents, listen, we get it. We don't provide couches, right? Someone else does, and we can help them find and connect with those other people. But we provide beds. Remember the one charity I told you about, right, in North Carolina? They're called Beds for Kids. They're awesome, right? They actually started before me, obviously, because I found them. They still provide the same amount of beds they did 14 years ago. And the reason why is because their mission was providing beds for kids. But now they provide all sorts of other services. Good or bad, you get to decide. But my point here is my mission is not to provide a couch. My mission is to solve a single problem, which is child bedlessness. So we put all our efforts and focus in that bucket, right? And now because of that, we're the largest bed building charity in the world. We provide over 100,000 beds a year, right? And we grow chapters. You can go to our website. You can actually start a chapter. If you don't have a chapter close by, you can start one. And our training chapter presidents, it's a very robust training. We put 50, 60 new chapters on a year with only 1 or 2 attrition loss, right? We don't lose that many chapters. And most of it's because they move or something happens personally. We have a very successful rate because we want our chapter presidents just to focus on 3 things: raise money, build beds, deliver beds. That's it. We take care of all the, administration mumbo jumbo for them. We want the common Joe like me to be able to build beds as easy as possible. So we spend a lot of time, management, administration, dollars to make that process as easy. It's interesting. We're very proud of this. We actually take $1. If you donate $1 to SHP, we convert that to $1.30. That's because of our buying power and how far we stretch that dollar, right? We just have that ability, which is great. But it's important to understand that this is a community problem, right? Number one, your audience, there's a good chance your audience has no idea that child bedlessness is this bad and it's this big. Most people, I haven't had a podcaster that I've been on, and I've been on hundreds and hundreds, have said, "Oh yeah, I know about it." No one knows, and so the only ask I have, right? You can go to our website if this is something that strikes a chord with you. Check us out. There are kids right now in your community that are sleeping on the floor. I guarantee it, right? But the least I ask is just share this podcast. Share what you hear today, right? We can't fix America. We can't fix our problems if we don't know about it. And I love what you're doing. You're on your way, brother. That's awesome. And it takes an army to do that. It starts with a tiny moment. It starts with acting on tiny moments and building that and finding your passion. And then your passion turns into purpose, and purpose turns into meaning of life. My gosh, but we've got to let people know what's going on, right? You never know. I've had a lot of stories where people in grocery lines are talking about SHP. Well, the person behind them is a single mom that doesn't have any beds for their kids. Now she knows where to go, right? These are the things that snowball into real change. They snowball into real effect. And listen, as a volunteer, wanting to follow a tiny moment, right? And the sad thing is, Matt, we all dismiss these tiny moments way too easily. I'm guilty too. I'm too busy. I don't know how to do it, right? Someone else is taking care of it. They've got it, right? But you received the invitation. You received the tiny moment that says, "Hey, Matt, maybe we should get off the couch and do something about this," right? And listen, I didn't get off the couch because I was going to start the largest bed building charity in the world. I didn't even know what I was doing to get off the couch. I just wanted something for my kids to look back on that we did together, right? So when you act on your tiny moment, it might not change the world, but it'll change someone's world, and that someone might just be you, and that's perfectly fine.
I really, really love what you're doing. It goes right with everything that we stand for. It's great. I really love what you're doing. Is there anything that we missed that you want to add before we sign off?
No, just that. Thanks for having me on. And listen, hey, podcasters don't get recognized and appreciated for what you guys do. You could be doing something else right now, Matt. You could. I don't know what you could be doing.
Probably 100 different things, building some software or something. But no, absolutely. It's important that there be a platform where people can come, talk, and have honest conversations, and not have to worry about being monitored or this crazy censorship. I mean, that's the reason I started a podcast. I had a big live stream on YouTube, and back with all that censorship mess, I put up a couple videos. I cited the sources, the Surgeon General in Florida, whatever, it was COVID. And it was, censor this, censor that. I ended up losing my daggum channel. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do a podcast where this doesn't happen. The push of a button, and somebody can't just say, "Oh, well, we don't like this." Boom.
Well, it's because of people like you that have platforms that allow voices to be heard. And that, again, goes back to how we solve problems. So thanks for having the podcast, and thanks for having me on. This has been great. I hope your audience, understands the real need here. I hope it inspires them. And maybe it's not building beds. Maybe it's doing something. It's helping your charity. It's helping other charities. Listen, follow your tiny moments. Because if you don't do anything, guess what's going to happen? Nothing. If you want real change, you got to stop focusing on wanting to change. We all have that. Okay, that box is checked. What you need to focus in on is your desire to act. And that desire to act, you can practice it. And practicing it by acting on your tiny moments. As small as that, maybe it's just mowing your neighbor's lawn. Maybe it's just calling a friend and saying hi. These small acts of kindness are practices to get you to finding your passion. And once you find it, that passion will turn into purpose, which is the meaning of life. So,
absolutely. That's moving us in the right direction. I don't even think I could say it any better. So that's going to close us. And all y'all out there, remember, truth is not partisan. It's patriotic.